250 years. On July 4, 2026, the United States of America celebrates its 250th birthday, a journey that gave rise to some of the greatest achievements in human history. Achievements that did not just change America, they changed the world. These were not the achievements of kings or empires. They were built by ordinary people, generation after generation, who refused to accept that something could not be done. Let us remember the people who made them possible, embrace the legacy they left behind, and take inspiration for everything that still lies ahead. In the 1860s, the United States was two separate worlds. The East had cities, industry, and established civilization. The West had gold, land, and promise, but reaching it meant a 6-month journey by wagon through mountains, deserts, and brutal weather that killed 1 in 10 travelers. Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act in 1862 in the middle of the Civil War, commissioning 2 companies to build a railroad that would physically stitch the country together. Union Pacific built westward from Omaha, Nebraska, using mostly Irish immigrants and Civil War veterans. Central Pacific built eastward from Sacramento, California, using approximately 10,000 Chinese workers who descended cliff faces in hand-woven baskets to drill holes in solid granite and set explosive charges by hand without any bulldozer, drill machines, or demolition hammer. On May 10, 1869, the 2 lines met at Promontory Summit, Utah. A golden spike was driven into the ground. Because of this 1,912 miles long railroad, travel time coast to coast dropped from 6 months to 7 days. The cost of shipping goods fell by 90% overnight. Cities appeared where there had been nothing. The American West opened not as a dream, but as a destination. Chinese also celebrate this achievement and take pride in it, because it was not merely a railroad. It was the physical act of turning a fragmented country into one unified continental nation. In 1878, when darkness fell, civilization essentially stopped. Factories closed. Streets were dimly lit by gas flame where they were lit at all. These gas lamps have severe safety risks, high daily maintenance, and poor environmental performance. That's why the entire rhythm of human life had been dictated by the position of the sun for the whole of recorded history. Thomas Edison, a 31-year-old inventor from Ohio, understood that the challenge was not simply to build a glowing bulb, but to build the entire system around it. He tested more than 6,000 different materials for the filament before discovering that carbonized bamboo could burn for over 1,200 hours inside a sealed glass bulb. He then built the dynamo to generate electricity, the underground copper cable network to carry it, the parallel circuit so one failed bulb would not kill all the others, the fuse box, and the electric meter to bill customers. On September 4, 1882, world's first power station named Pearl Street Station in Lower Manhattan activated and powered the offices and lamps of 59 customers. Within 14 months, more than 500 customers were connected and 12,000 lamps were burning. The world never went dark in the same way again. Every factory that runs a night shift, every surgeon who operates at midnight, every student who reads after sunset, all of it begins with Edison flipping a switch on a Manhattan street in 1882. For the entirety of recorded human history, the sky belonged to birds. Leonardo da Vinci sketched flying machines in 1485. Gliders had been built, balloons had floated, but sustained, controlled, powered flight in a heavier-than-air machine had never once been achieved by any civilization, in any country, in any century. Orville and Wilbur Wright were bicycle mechanics from Dayton, Ohio, with no college degrees, no government funding, and a total development budget of approximately $1,000. Their insight was different from everyone else who had tried. While other engineers focused on building a more powerful engine, the Wright brothers understood the real problem was control, how to steer a machine once it was in the air. They built their own wind tunnel, tested over 200 wing shapes, designed their own engine, and invented a 3-axis control system using wing warping, an elevator, and a coordinated rear rudder. On December 17, 1903, at Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina, Orville flew the first powered, controlled, sustained flight in history. 12 seconds, 120 feet. By the 4th flight that same morning, Wilbur covered 852 feet in 59 seconds. It's the official beginning of humans in the sky. From that beach in North Carolina, it took humanity 66 years to reach the moon. By December 1941, Europe had been at war for more than 2 years and was losing. Germany had conquered France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, Norway, Denmark, Greece, and Yugoslavia. Britain was fighting for survival, essentially alone. The Soviet Union had been invaded, and German forces were 15 miles from Moscow. Japan controlled most of East Asia and the Pacific. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, killing 2,403 Americans in 2 hours. The United States entered the war the following morning. What happened next was unlike anything in the history of industrial production. In 4 years, America produced 300,000 military aircraft, 2,700 ships, 100,000 tanks, and 44 billion rounds of ammunition. By 1944, the United States alone was manufacturing more war material than every Axis nation combined. On June 6, 1944, 156,000 Allied troops crossed the English Channel and landed on the beaches of Normandy in the largest seaborne invasion in history. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. The war in the Pacific ended in September 1945. When it was over, America did not claim territory or demand reparations. Instead, it spent $13 billion rebuilding the destroyed economies of Europe, created the United Nations, established NATO, and designed the financial system that governed global trade for the next 8 decades. America won the deadliest war in human history and then, deliberately, built the peaceful world that came after it. On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress and made a promise that no rational assessment of American capability at that moment justified making. The United States had exactly 15 minutes and 22 seconds of total human spaceflight experience. The Soviet Union was leading in every meaningful category: first satellite, first human in orbit, first spacewalk. Kennedy said America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. At the time of that speech, no rocket existed that could do it. No guidance system had been designed. No one knew if the lunar surface was solid enough to land on, and no one was certain the human body could survive the radiation of deep space. 8 years later, 400,000 engineers, scientists, and technicians had built the Saturn V, still the most powerful rocket ever successfully flown, and sent 3 men across 239,000 miles of space. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed the Eagle on the surface of the moon with 17 seconds of fuel remaining. 600 million people watched on television simultaneously, 1 in every 5 human beings alive on Earth. Armstrong stepped out and spoke words that will be remembered as long as there are people to remember them. No other nation has ever stood on the surface of another world. The technologies developed for Apollo returned to Earth as memory foam, water purification systems, cordless tools, scratch-resistant lenses, and the computing concepts that made the personal computer possible. On October 29, 1969, a graduate student at UCLA typed a message intended for a computer at Stanford, 350 miles away. The message was meant to say, "Logan." The system crashed after the first 2 letters. The first transmission ever sent across what would become the internet was the word LO. The network was called ARPANET, funded by the United States Defense Department as a communications infrastructure designed to survive a nuclear attack by routing data around destroyed nodes rather than through a central hub. In 1971, Ray Tomlinson invented email and chose the @ symbol to separate a user's name from their computer, a symbol that would go on to appear on billions of devices across the world. In 1991, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, the navigable layer that made the internet accessible to people who were not engineers. By 1994, Amazon had launched, Netscape had launched, and the commercial era of the internet had begun. Today, 5.4 billion people use it every day. It has restructured commerce, communication, medicine, education, journalism, and the nature of human relationships in ways that are still unfolding. The internet is not a single invention. It is the infrastructure on which the entire 21st century is being constructed. In September 1958, an engineer at Texas Instruments named Jack Kilby demonstrated the first integrated circuit, a complete electronic system built onto a single sliver of silicon, and quietly triggered one of the most consequential chains of events in human history. A decade later, Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore founded Intel. In 1971, Intel released the 4004 processor, which contained 2,300 transistors on a chip smaller than a human thumbnail. Moore had predicted in 1965 that transistor counts would double roughly every 2 years while the cost per transistor would fall by half, and that prediction held true for nearly 60 years, producing an exponential improvement in computing power that outpaced almost every other technology in recorded history. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built the Apple I in a garage in Los Altos, California. In 1981, IBM launched the personal computer and hired a 23-year-old named Bill Gates to provide the operating system, a decision that made Microsoft the most valuable company in the world within 15 years. In In 1984, the Macintosh brought the graphical interface to everyday people. In 1998, two Stanford students founded Google. In 2007, Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone and placed a functional computer in the pocket of every person who could afford one. A stretch of California farmland south of San Francisco, roughly 30 miles long, produced more technological transformation in 50 years than most of the world had produced in the previous 5 centuries. The 5 largest American technology companies today have a combined market value larger than the entire economic output of every country on Earth except the United States and China. Inside the nucleus of every single cell in the human body is a coiled molecule of DNA containing approximately 3.2 billion chemical letters, arranged in a precise sequence that encodes the complete instructions for building a human being, running its biology, and passing its traits to the next generation. Before 1990, this sequence had never been read. Scientists did not know how many genes humans carried. They had not mapped a single complete chromosome. On October 1st, 1990, an international scientific consortium led by the United States launched a project to read every one of those 3.2 billion letters, with a budget of $3 billion and a timeline of 15 years. On June 26, 2000, President Clinton and Prime Minister Blair announced jointly that a working draft of the human genome was complete. The final verified sequence was published on April 14, 2003, 2 years ahead of schedule and under budget. What the scientists found permanently changed medicine. The knowledge made it possible to identify the specific genetic mutations that drive specific cancers, to develop drugs that target those mutations precisely, to edit defective genes using tools like CRISPR, and to sequence any individual's complete genome in 24 hours for under $200. A genome that cost $3 billion to read once in 2003 can now be read by any clinical laboratory for less than a single doctor's visit. Humanity had spent its entire existence running on instructions it could not read. In 2003, it read them for the first time.